Sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with something as simple as a cup of coffee. He was just a poor single father, trying to make it through each day. One shift, one cup, one small act of kindness at a time. She was a stranger, cold, and tired, with a secret powerful enough to change everything. Neither of them knew that a single moment, just one quiet gesture, one steaming mug handed across a counter, would alter the course of both their lives forever. This is not just a love story. It's a story about second chances, about healing, about choosing kindness when no one's watching and finding something magical in return. If you believe in the quiet power of kindness, if you've ever hoped that love could find you when you least expect it, then stay with us. And if you enjoy stories like this, stories that warm your heart and stir something deeper, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it helps us keep bringing you beautiful stories that remind us all the smallest things often leave the biggest mark. Now let me take you to a small town in Vermont, where the snow was falling, the coffee was hot, and a man behind a counter made a decision that would change everything. A poor, single father offered coffee to a girl, unaware. She was a billionaire CEO in hiding. The snow had been falling steadily since dawn, blanketing the small Vermont town of Maple Ridge in quiet, muffled white. The roads were nearly empty now, except for the occasional pickup truck crawling through slush and salt. Ethan Carter stood behind the counter of his old coffee shop, been there, wiping down the same section of the worn wooden countertop for the third time that morning. It was just past 9 a.m., and the usual morning crowd, if one could call it that, had already come and gone. Retired Mr. Jensen with his crossword, Maggie the florist with her peppermint mocha, and a couple of snowplow drivers exchanging tired jokes. Ethan liked the rhythm of it all. Predictable, steady, safe. He poured himself a cup of the house blend and stepped to the window. That's when he saw her. She was standing just outside the shop, wrapped in a too-thin coat, her arms hugging her body against the biting cold. Her long, dark hair was dusted with snow, and her boots looked more suited for a city sidewalk than a Vermont winter. But it wasn't her clothes that caught Ethan's attention. It was her eyes, wide, hesitant, searching, and tired, bone-deep tired. Their eyes met through the frosted glass. She looked away quickly, as if caught in something she hadn't meant to share. Ethan didn't think. He opened the door. "You look like you could use something warm," he said gently, holding it open as the wind hissed around them. She hesitated. "I don't have," she started, her voice cracking with cold. "It's on the house," Ethan interrupted, offering a small, earnest smile. "Come in, just coffee, nothing else." She looked at him for a beat too long, like she was trying to decide if kindness had strings here. Then she nodded once and stepped inside. The warmth of the shop wrapped around her like a quilt. Her hands were trembling as she unzipped her coat, and Ethan noticed the flush of cold on her cheeks had reached an almost painful pink. He handed her a cup, already filled. "House blend. It's not fancy, but it's honest." She took it with both hands, held it close to her face, and exhaled slowly. "Thank you," she murmured. Her voice was soft, educated, but frayed around the edges, like a piano played too many years in. "Smoky bars." Ethan nodded and stepped back behind the counter. He didn't push conversation. Years of grief and solitude had taught him that some people just needed space to breathe. She sat at the corner table near the window, the same one his wife used to love before cancer hollowed her out and left him. Alone with a toddler and too many questions. He looked at the girl now, woman, really, and something inside him stirred. Not desire, not yet, just concern, a flicker of protectiveness. He let her sit in peace. 20 minutes passed. She didn't speak, Just sipped the coffee slowly, as if trying to warm more than her hands. Ethan busied himself behind the counter, pretending not to notice her watching the snow, the way her eyes lingered on nothing in particular. There was a weight to her silence, not just fatigue, but something deeper, a kind of running from something heaviness he recognized in his own reflection sometimes. When she finally stood, Ethan looked up. She reached into her coat pocket and froze, then sighed. I don't have anything on me right now, she said quietly. I wasn't planning on stopping. I know, Ethan replied simply. She blinked. You do? He nodded. People don't shiver like that when they're on schedule. A faint laugh escaped her. It sounded surprised, real. He waved it off. Come back sometime, return the favor. Or don't. No pressure. She stood there, unmoving, as if unsure how to handle this lack of expectation. Then she reached into the front pocket of her bag and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I don't have money, she said, placing it on the counter. But I've always believed in leaving something behind. When Ethan unfolded it, the words inside were written in neat, slanted handwriting. Thank you for treating me like a person. He looked up, but the door had already closed behind her. She'd vanished into the snow, like she was never there. Ethan stood in silence for a moment, the note still in his hand. Then he smiled, a quiet thing, and pinned the paper to the corkboard behind the counter, right between a child's crayon drawing of a smiling sun and a faded postcard from Idaho. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest acts echo the loudest, and though he didn't know her name, or why she looked so broken, or who she was, he had a strange feeling that she would be back, maybe tomorrow, maybe not, but he hoped she'd come, because something in her eyes reminded him of a truth he'd almost forgotten. Everyone is running from something, but sometimes they stop, not to hide, to heal. The following morning, the snow had turned to slush. The streets of Maple Ridge were grey and heavy, salted down by the town's overworked plows. Ethan unlocked the front door of Billionaire with a flick of his wrist and the quiet grunt of someone who'd done it too many mornings to count. The bell above the door jingled with its familiar tired cheer, and he stepped inside to the cold hush of the shop. By 7:30 a.m., the regulars had begun to trickle in. Maggie with her winter bouquet tucked under one arm, Bill, the retired firefighter who still insisted on carrying his own thermos, and Marcy, who ran the bookstore next door and always asked for a latte with an extra shot of sunshine. They came and went with the rhythm of small-town mornings. Ethan greeted each one with easy warmth, but his eyes kept flicking to the door. He didn't admit it to himself, not out loud, but part of him was waiting. At 9:06 a.m., the door creaked open again. She stepped inside like someone testing the air of a room she used to know. Same thin coat, same cautious eyes, though her cheeks had more color today. Her gaze met his briefly, unsure, questioning. You came back, Ethan said, softer than he intended. She hesitated. I wasn't sure I would. But you did. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. You are. He didn't offer more, just poured a cup of the house blend and slid it across the counter. No questions, no conditions. She took the cup with both hands, sat at the same table by the window, and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since yesterday. This time, Ethan didn't retreat behind the counter. He stepped out with a second mug, sat at the table across from her and said nothing, just let the silence settle between them like steam rising off warm coffee. You didn't ask my name, she said eventually, her voice low. I figured you'd. Tell me when you were ready. She looked at him carefully, as if measuring whether he meant it. I'm Maya, she said finally. Maya, he repeated, as if committing it to memory. I'm Ethan. A short silence. Then a nod of mutual understanding passed between them, like a secret handshake neither had learned, but both instinctively knew. Maya looked out the window again, watching a boy in a puffy jacket slip on the icy sidewalk and laugh as he caught himself. "Is it always this quiet around here?" "Quieter in the winter," Ethan replied. "The tourists don't start showing up until the Maple Festival's in March. Then it gets loud, sticky, and overpriced." She smiled. "Not wide, not bright, but real." "You like it here?" she asked. Ethan looked around the shop, his hand unconsciously brushing the scarred wood of the table. "It's simple, predictable. After a few rough years, that's enough. For me." He didn't elaborate. She didn't pry. They drank their coffee in companionable silence. Ethan noticed the way Maya's fingers curled around the mug, like it was something precious. She noticed how Ethan's eyes softened when he looked at the world outside the window, like he was still trying to make peace with something he didn't speak of. "I used to like coffee shops," she said after a while. "Used to?" She nodded. "Too many people started recognizing me, got hard to disappear." He tilted his head. "You're not exactly blending in with that coat." A small laugh. "Fair." She didn't say more, and he didn't push. But he filed it away. Recognition, disappearing. There was a story there, one she wasn't ready to tell. When Maya stood to leave, she reached into her coat pocket again and paused. This time, she pulled out a folded $5 bill and slid it across the table. "You don't have to—" Ethan began. "I want to," she interrupted gently. "Some things shouldn't be taken for free twice." He hesitated, then took the bill, not because he needed it, but because he understood what it meant to her. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, only half joking. Maya smiled, just a touch brighter than yesterday. "Maybe." She stepped back into the cold, the bell above the door ringing in her wake. Ethan watched the door swing shut, then turned toward the counter, where the note she'd left yesterday still hung between the crayon sun and the Idaho postcard. "Thank you for treating me like a person." He read it again, not because he needed the reminder, but because some words deserved to be heard more than once. The third morning came with grey skies and a wind that rattled the old windows of Billionaire like a restless ghost. Ethan was already behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, sorting through deliveries with a quiet efficiency that came only from years of repetition. At exactly 9:03 a.m., the door opened and Maya walked in with a small nod, as if they'd silently agreed this would now be part of her day. Ethan didn't speak at first. He simply poured the usual and handed it across the counter without fanfare. She accepted it, with a soft smile, her fingers already curling around the warmth. "You're predictable," she teased lightly. "And yet," he replied, "you keep coming back." She didn't deny it. Today she sat at a different table, closer to the fireplace, away from the window. Ethan noticed. He also noticed the way her shoulders relaxed more quickly, how she no longer scanned the room like someone checking for exits. Something in her was settling. And Ethan, without knowing exactly why, felt grateful. After the regulars cleared out, Maya lingered. The silence between them had grown comfortable, like a favorite old sweater. Ethan took his own coffee and sat across from her, not asking for permission. "So," he said, "what's your story, Maya from nowhere?" She smiled into her cup. "That's a complicated question. I've got time." She looked up at him, searching for a hint of judgment. She didn't find any. "I used to work a lot," she said slowly. "Built something, grew it, watched it slip away." Ethan didn't speak, just nodded, encouraging her to continue at her own pace. "I was good at what I did," she went on. "Too good, maybe. People started seeing numbers instead of a person, and I let them." "You sound like you're still angry about it." "I'm not," she said. "I'm tired of it." Silence again. Not uncomfortable, reflective. "What did you build?" he asked. She hesitated, then offered a vague answer. "A company." "Big?" "Big enough to lose myself in." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Funny thing about small towns," he said. You can't lose yourself here. Too many people who know your name, your dog's name, and how you take your coffee. Is that a good thing? He shrugged. Depends on whether you're running from something or towards something. Maya tilted her head. And you? Which way are you running? Neither, he said. I ran long enough. I'm just trying to stand still without falling apart. She looked at him then, really looked, like she was seeing more than his flannel shirt and rough hands. There was something steady in Ethan, something unshakable, not because he hadn't been broken, but because he had, and somehow chose to keep showing up anyway. What happened to your wife? She asked quietly. Ethan was surprised she asked, but he didn't flinch. Cancer, he said, 3 years ago. I'm sorry, so was I. He let the words sit for a moment before continuing. I was angry for a while, then numb, then just tired, same as you maybe, but I had a little boy who needed me to be more than tired. Maya's eyes softened. You have a son? Ben. He's 8, smarter than me and knows it. A smile crept across her face. He sounds like trouble, the best kind. Maya glanced toward the corner where a stack of board games sat, long forgotten. You bring him here? Sometimes. He likes to help sweep and eat all the muffins he accidentally drops. She laughed, and it was lighter this time, like something uncoiling in her chest. I miss that, she said. What? Simple. Things, muffins, fireplace heat, conversations that don't end in negotiations or PR statements. Ethan met her gaze. Then maybe you're in the right place. She didn't respond right away, just stared into her cup. I used to think being important meant being needed, she said. But now I'm not sure it didn't just mean being used. Ethan's voice was steady. There's a difference. I know. I just forgot. They sat like that for a while. 2 people shaped by different storms, sharing the same stillness, no promises, no expectations, just warmth and listening. When Maya stood to leave, she looked more grounded somehow, like her boots had finally found traction in this town of strangers. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Ethan smiled. I thought you didn't plan things. I don't, she said over her shoulder, pushing the door open. But I like patterns. Especially the kind that involve good coffee. The bell above the door chimed as she disappeared into the afternoon grey. Ethan stood for a long while after, his cup cooling in his hand, the scent of fresh roast lingering in the air. Something was shifting, not quickly, not loudly, but undeniably. And, for the first time in years, he didn't feel like winter was something to survive. Saturday arrived draped in early evening gold, the kind of light that made even bare trees look like they were holding on to something warm. Ethan stood in his modest kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a dusting of flour on his cheek as he sliced gingerbread, dough into crooked stars. On the stove, apple cider simmered quietly, filling the air with cinnamon and comfort. From the living room came the sound of Ben's voice, high and animated, narrating a dinosaur attack with full sound effects. Ethan smiled to himself, grateful for the background noise. It made the house feel less like a place that had once been quiet with grief and more like a home again. When the knock came at the door, Ben darted to open it. Ethan moved quickly, intercepting. Shoes, he said, tossing Ben's sneakers toward him. Ben groaned but obeyed, and Ethan opened the door. Maya stood there, cheeks pink from the wind, a paper bag in one hand and an uncertain smile on her face. You weren't kidding, she said, eyeing the flower on his shirt. You actually bake. I have a very demanding sous chef, Ethan replied, nodding toward Ben, who appeared behind him. Maya crouched slightly. You must be Ben. The boy looked at her warily, as only an 8-year-old with excellent instincts does. Do you like dinosaurs? Maya blinked. Sure, especially the ones that don't eat people. Ben narrowed his eyes. That's a trick answer, but I'll allow it. Maya laughed, and just like that the tension melted. Ethan stepped aside to let her in. The house was small but tidy, lived in without being cluttered. Framed photos lined a narrow shelf, mostly of Ethan and Ben, some with a smiling woman whose face bore a quiet, enduring presence, even in stillness. Maya paused briefly at one, her hand brushing the frame without touching it. "Your wife?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded. "Emily. She passed when Ben was 5. "I'm sorry," he offered a quiet smile. "We remember her in gingerbread." Maya turned toward the kitchen. "That's oddly sweet." "She was a Christmas fanatic," Ethan said. "Even made gingerbread in July once, said life was too short to wait for joy." Maya didn't say anything, but her expression changed, like something inside her recognized the ache beneath his words. Ben appeared, holding 2 cookie cutters, one star, one triceratops. "Can you help?" he asked Maya. She blinked. "Me? You're a guest," Ethan said, amused. Ben shrugged. She passed the dinosaur test. Maya slipped off her coat and stepped into the kitchen like someone entering a memory not her own. Ethan handed her an apron. It was a faded navy blue with the words, "Baker's doesn't judge," printed crookedly on the front. For the next hour, the kitchen became a symphony of laughter, cookie dough, and cider refills. Maya turned out to be a terrible baker, but a fantastic storyteller, improvising tales about gingerbread dragons and frosting battles. Ethan watched from across the counter, quietly mesmerized. She was different here, looser, brighter. Not the guarded woman sipping coffee in the corner booth, but someone lighter, shedding shadows like old coats. At one point, Maya caught him watching her. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing," he said. "You're just good with him." "I didn't know I would be," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I've spent years surrounded by adults who only pretended to listen." "Ben doesn't pretend," Ethan said. "If he doesn't like you, he'll tell you with Legos," Maya chuckled. "Good to know." They sat down around the small dining table, sampling crooked cookies and sipping cider. Ben eventually wandered off, his sugar high giving way to cartoon. Fatigue. As quiet settled over the house, Ethan and Maya remained at the table. "This place," she said softly. "It's nothing like what I'm used to. That a good thing or a bad thing?" "It's a real thing," she replied, "which is rare. Where I come from, everything's curated and polished and hollow. You don't talk about it much. There's not much worth repeating." Ethan tilted his head. "You seem different tonight." "How so?" "More here, less running." Maya looked down at her mug. "Maybe I'm just tired of being somewhere else." He let the silence stretch, then asked the question that had been, "Growing for days, are you going back?" She didn't answer right away. "I don't know," she said finally. "Some part of me keeps waiting for the world I left to demand I return. But another part doesn't care if it does." Ethan's voice was quiet. "This town has a way of showing up when you least expect it." Maya smiled, but it was laced with uncertainty. "I'm not sure I belong anywhere anymore." "You do here," he said simply. She looked up then, eyes meeting his, and something passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but the seed of something possible. A beat later, Ben's voice rang out from the other room. "Dad!" She left crumbs. "On the couch," Maya laughed, covering her mouth with mock guilt. "Guess I'm officially part of the chaos now." Ethan smiled. "Welcome to it." And as the night deepened outside, and the warmth of cider and cookies lingered in the air, something shifted between them, something small, but unmistakably real. The snow returned on Tuesday, soft, quiet, like an apology whispered through the trees. The town of Maple Ridge slowed again, content to retreat into blankets and fireplaces and warm mugs. But the seat by the window had been there, sat empty. Ethan noticed. He told himself not to. But he did. By the third day, Maya hadn't shown up. He stopped pretending. He didn't ask Maggie if she'd seen a woman in a city coat. He didn't bring it up with Bill or Marcy or the mailman who always ordered his coffee lukewarm and sweet. But he checked the time more often, glanced at the door with quiet hope. And each time it stayed shut, a small part of him felt foolish. He didn't have her number, didn't know her last name. He couldn't even be sure where she'd come from or where she might have gone. What he did know was that something had shifted that night at his house. The laughter, the ease, the look in her eyes when he said she belonged here. It hadn't been one-sided. He'd felt it. And yet, now there was silence. By Friday afternoon, the snow had stopped, but the cold remained sharp. Ethan finished cleaning early, flipped the sign to closed even though he technically had an hour left. He packed a thermos of coffee, extra strong, and headed out. It wasn't a conscious decision. His feet just moved, as if drawn by instinct, rather than logic. He found her by the frozen lake at the edge of town, sitting on a weathered bench, half buried in snow. Her hair was tucked beneath a knit hat, and her gloved hands clutched each other tightly in her lap. She didn't look up as he approached. "I brought coffee," he said, holding out the thermos. She turned slightly, then sighed. "I figured you might." "Because I'm predictable?" "Because you care," she said, "even when you probably shouldn't." He handed her the thermos and sat down beside her. The cold cut through his jeans, but he didn't move. "You disappeared," he said gently. "I know. Want to talk about it?" "No." They sat in silence for a moment. The lake stretched before them, glassy and still. Beyond it, trees stood like frozen sentinels. "I had a visitor," Maya said. "Finally. Someone from before been there." She nodded. "Someone who knows who I was, who expected me to still be her." Ethan waited. "I panicked," she said. "I thought I could outrun all of it, the company, the headlines, the pressure. But when he showed up, just a familiar face in an unfamiliar place, I realized I hadn't outrun anything. I just paused it." Ethan looked at her, really looked. Her face was paler than usual, her eyes distant. "You're scared," he said, not as a question. "I'm exhausted," she whispered. "I spent 10 years building something I thought would matter, something I thought would make me matter. And in the end, none of it was mine. Not really. They took it the moment I slowed down long enough to breathe." She gripped the thermos tighter. "I don't know who I am outside of that world." "You're kind," Ethan said softly, "and funny. You're terrible at baking. You're good with kids. You laugh at my bad jokes, and you drink too much coffee even though you pretend you're cutting back." A smile ghosted across her lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm also a coward," she said. "No," he replied, "you're just healing." Maya looked at him then, and for a moment the vulnerability in her gaze was raw, unguarded. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she said. "Weak, shaken." Ethan shook his head. "This is the strongest I've ever seen you." They sat in silence again. Snow began to fall, light and tentative, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. "I don't know if I can stay," Maya said. "Eventually. This town, it's too real, too honest, and I don't know if I can be that." "You already are," Ethan said. She turned to him, a question in her eyes. "I don't care who you were before," he added. "All I know is who you are when you're here. That woman matters." Maya blinked, then looked down at the thermos in her lap. "You really believe that?" "I wouldn't be freezing my butt off on a park bench if I didn't." That coaxed a laugh from her, small but real. She leaned her head against his shoulder, hesitantly at first, then with more weight. Ethan didn't move. He just let her rest. The lake remained silent. The snow fell softly. And on that bench, 2 people sat side by side, saying nothing and everything. The lights in Bean, they glowed warmer at night. Ethan often left the lamps low, letting the orange bulbs reflect off the wood-paneled walls and ripple gently across the windows. It gave the place a hush, like a memory you didn't want to speak. Too loudly. Maya arrived after closing. He'd left the door unlocked, just in case. She stepped inside wearing a long grey coat and a silence that seemed heavier than usual. Ethan had already poured 2 cups. He handed her one without a word. She took it but didn't sip. "Thanks," she said quietly. "You're welcome." They sat at the corner booth, the same one where she'd first watched the snow fall without saying a word. Only this time the silence between them wasn't uncertain, it was waiting. Maya's hands were wrapped around the cup, unmoving. Her gaze fixed on a crack in the tabletop like it held the answer to a question she hadn't yet asked. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. Ethan nodded. "Okay." She took a breath. "My full name is Maya Whitmore." He blinked. The name didn't register immediately, but the flicker in her eyes told him it would, eventually. "I started a tech company called Lumora when I was 27. We built consumer AI tools, smart scheduling, voice assistants, small business integration software. We grew fast, too fast maybe. Venture capital, IPO, press interviews, then backlash. There was a leak, and the media tore into me. Misquoted emails, taken out of context internal memos, stock drop. I stepped down. Publicly, it was my choice. Privately, not really." Ethan listened, not interrupting. "I disappeared, left my apartment, my office, my entire life. Got in a car and drove north until the noise started to fade, and I ended up here." Her voice shook on the last words. She wasn't crying, but it was the kind of tremble that came from telling a truth you've rehearsed 100 times in your head but never dared to say out loud. Ethan leaned back slowly, taking in her face as if seeing it anew. Maya Whitmore. He knew the name now. He remembered a magazine cover from a year ago. Forbes or Time, he couldn't be sure. A story about the youngest female CEO of a billion-dollar startup who vanished from the public eye. He looked at her. Not the headlines, not the past, just her. "So that's who you were," he said after a long pause. "But it's not all of who you are." She searched his face. "You're not surprised?" "I'm surprised," he admitted, "but not shocked. I've known from the beginning. You were carrying something heavy." Maya laughed, short, breathy, almost bitter. "I was terrified you'd change, that you'd look at me and see what the rest of the world saw. A headline, a scandal, a woman who lost everything she built." Ethan met her eyes. "I see a woman who's still standing. That counts for more." She blinked once, then again, as if unsure how to take his words at face value. "I lied," she said. "No," Ethan corrected gently. "You withheld. That's different. You were surviving." She stared down at her coffee, the steam rising between them like a curtain she didn't want anymore. "You have every reason to walk away." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but I won't." Maya's head lifted sharply. "Why not?" He smiled faintly. "Because when you took your first sip of coffee in this shop, you didn't ask for anything. You didn't expect anything. And when you left that note, you reminded me what it meant to see someone without needing to own a piece of them." She swallowed hard. "I'm not who you thought I was." "No," he agreed. "You're more." Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, but the shop stayed warm. Still, solid. Maya reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small leather notebook, worn at the edges. She slid it across the table to Ethan. "It's my journal," she said, "from the past 3 years. The only honest thing I've written in a long time." He looked down at it but didn't touch it. "You sure you want me to read this?" She nodded. "I need someone to know who I am. Not for the press, not for the boardroom. For me." Ethan finally picked it up, turned it in his hands like it was something fragile. "I'll read it," he said, "but only if you promise me something." "What's that?" He looked her square in the eyes. "Come back tomorrow, same time, same booth." Maya breathed out like she'd been holding the air in her lungs all day. "I will." She stood, hesitated, then leaned across the table and kissed him softly on the cheek. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something else. a thank you, a bridge. And Ethan, still holding her journal, watched her walk out into the dark, no longer hiding, but beginning to return. Spring crept into Maple Ridge, not with fanfare, but with quiet gestures, melted icicles dripping from roof edges, soft buds on the stubborn apple trees, and the smell of damp earth returning after months buried beneath snow. Had been there, the front windows fogged a little less in the mornings, and the regulars began to shed their heavy coats. But the most noticeable change wasn't the weather, it was Maya. She had become, without anyone announcing it, part of the rhythm. She showed up early now before the first customer and helped Ethan set out the chairs, wipe the tables, brew the first pot of coffee. She tied her hair up with a pencil and wore one of the spare aprons that hung behind the counter, despite it being a size too large. When customers asked who she was, she simply smiled and said, "Just helping out." Ben had taken to her completely, insisting she taste his inventions at breakfast and demanding she judge his Lego structures with serious scrutiny. On Saturdays, she sat beside him on the floor of the shop during slow hours, assembling miniature castles while Ethan refilled cups and watched them from behind the counter, heart full, hands steady. Maya laughed more now, a fuller sound, from deeper in the chest. She'd stopped flinching at sudden noises, no longer glanced at the door like she was expecting someone from her old life to come bursting in. It was as if, piece by piece, she'd laid her armor down, on the bar stool, beside the coffee pot. In the smile she offered the mailman when he brought his usual half-cream, no judgment. She was still Maya Whitmore, but she was no longer hiding. One afternoon, Ethan stepped into the back room to grab a box of filters and returned to find Maya perched on a stool behind the register, guiding an elderly customer through their new loyalty punch card system, something Maya herself had suggested a week earlier. "I figure if you're going to keep giving people free coffee, you might as well get credit for it," she'd said, winking at Ethan. Now, watching her interact with Mrs. Kessler, who had never used a smartphone, let alone a punch card, Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Not worry, not confusion, just awe. She fit here, with him, with Ben, with this imperfect handmade life. Later that evening, after the shop had closed and Ben was fast asleep upstairs, Ethan and Maya stood in the quiet of the kitchen. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of vanilla and flour. Ethan handed her a mug, steam rising between them. "You're good at this," he said. "At coffee?" she teased. "At living slow," he said. She smiled, the kind of smile that crinkled her eyes. "I'm learning." They stood for a while, drinking in companionable silence. Then Maya reached into her back pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I didn't know when to tell you," she said. Ethan's hand paused halfway to his cup. "Tell me what?" She handed it over. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, formal, printed on heavy paper, the kind of letter that had consequences. He scanned the first few lines, then looked up. "They want you back?" Maya nodded. "My former board. There's been turmoil since I left. 2 resignations, a drop in share value. The press is shifting. They think bringing me back will stabilize things. They've offered me full executive power and a lot of money." Ethan didn't say anything. He looked at her, waiting. "I haven't said yes," she added quickly. "I haven't said anything." "Why bring it here?" he asked, his voice level. "Because I wanted to be honest. With you. With myself." Ethan stared at the letter again, as if it might explain something her face could not. "I thought I'd buried that part of my life," Maya continued. "But seeing this, feeling that tug again, it confused me." Ethan looked at her closely. "Do you want it?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I miss parts of it. The building, the vision, but I don't miss who I was in it. Who I had to be. Ethan folded the letter carefully and placed it back into her hands. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "If you want to go, go." "That's not what I'm asking," she replied. "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking—" Her voice faltered. "Is it wrong to want both? A life with meaning and this? You? Ben?" Ethan reached out, brushed his fingers gently against hers. "It's not wrong to want more. It's just dangerous when you forget what actually matters." Maya looked down at their hands. "I'm afraid I'll choose wrong." He gave a soft, sad smile. "You've already started choosing right. You came back. You stayed. The rest, you'll figure it out." She leaned into him. Not for a kiss, not yet, but for the kind of closeness that didn't need proving. Her head rested against his shoulder, and they stood there, quiet, two people in the middle of the softest storm. Neither noticed the wind picking up outside or the sound of sleet tapping gently against the windows. Inside, the world was still, warm, full, but outside, change was coming. The invitation sat on the kitchen counter like a landmine. No one dared step near. Maya hadn't moved it since she placed it there. A thick white envelope bearing the elegant gold seal of her former company, Lumora, like it was some royal summons. Ethan had glanced at it each morning and every evening, but never touched it again. She hadn't answered yet, but the silence between them had begun to say more than words. Maya was still helping at being there, still laughing with Ben, still wiping flour off her nose after baking with Ethan. But something had shifted. Her hands lingered less, her eyes drifted more. There was a kind of restlessness beneath her skin, as though part of her was already packing invisible bags. Ethan felt it in the pauses between conversations, in the way she stared at the espresso machine too long, like it was a metaphor for something she couldn't name. And though she never said it, he knew the decision was no longer about the job. It was about belonging. It was Saturday, when everything began to unravel. The shop was busier than usual, tourists passing through for the maple trail, locals drawn in by the scent of cinnamon buns Maya had insisted on baking just for fun. Ben was seated behind the counter, coloring dinosaurs, while Maya moved like she belonged there, which, in some ways, she did. Ethan stepped out for a moment to fix the sidewalk chalkboard. When he came back in, Maya was talking to someone, a man. Tall, sharply dressed, with a trimmed beard and a scarf too fashionable for this town. Her past had walked through the door. Ethan froze just beyond the doorway, watching them. The man was leaning in, speaking low. Maya's expression flickered, surprise then guarded civility. She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. When she finally noticed Ethan, her lips parted, almost apologetically. "Ethan!" she called, as the man turned. "This is Daniel. He's from Lumora." Of course he was. Daniel extended a hand. "Pleasure to meet you. Maya speaks very highly of this place." Ethan shook his hand briefly, then looked to Maya. "Everything okay?" Daniel answered for her. "Just a courtesy visit. She's been hard to reach." Maya's jaw tightened. "I haven't made my decision." "No rush," Daniel said smoothly. "Though the board would love an answer before the shareholders' meeting next week." Ethan's stomach tightened. After Daniel left, leaving behind nothing but the scent of expensive cologne and a business card, Ethan returned to the counter, wiping it down with more force than necessary. "You didn't tell me someone was coming," he said. "I didn't know," Maya replied, taking off her apron. "But you let him talk to you." "I couldn't exactly throw him out." "You could have tried." She paused, surprised by the edge in his voice. "What do you want me to say?" "Ethan!" He looked at her, really looked. "I want to know if you've already made up your mind." "I haven't, but you're thinking about it." "Of course I am," she snapped. "It's my company, my life." "And what's this, then?" he asked, gesturing toward the shop, toward Ben, who was now silently watching them both. "Just an intermission." Maya's face fell. "That's not fair. Neither is pretending you want to stay when your heart's already halfway out the—" Door. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The air thickened with all the things neither of them had said. How much he cared, how much she feared hurting him, how close they'd come to building something real. "I didn't come here looking for anything," she said finally, voice trembling. "I just wanted a place to breathe. And then, Ben, it caught me off guard." "You caught me off guard," Ethan said, softer now. "And I let you in. I let you matter." She looked down, blinking hard. "I don't know how to choose." "You don't have to choose," he said. "Just be honest about where you're going." Maya nodded slowly, eyes glassy. "I need space." Ethan stepped back, wounded but calm. "Take it." She left quietly that afternoon, coat slung over one arm, Daniel's business card still untouched on the counter. Ben watched from the window as her car disappeared down the snowy road. "Is she coming back?" he asked. Ethan knelt beside him, unsure of how to explain the tangle of adult hearts. "I don't know, buddy," he said, "but we're going to keep the coffee warm, just in case." That night, the shop was quieter than it had been in weeks. The warmth was still there. The light, the love, but the seat by the window, her seat, sat empty once again. The first morning without her felt like winter had returned overnight. Ethan opened Bean there at 6:45 a.m., as always, but the rhythm felt different. Offbeat. The chairs scraped louder. The coffee didn't smell quite as rich. Even the bell above. The door jingled in a tone that felt a touch lonelier. He set her favorite mug out by habit. Second shelf, blue rim, small chip on the handle, but after 5 minutes, he put it back. Ben noticed, but didn't say anything. He was a thoughtful kid, smart in the ways that didn't show up on report cards. That morning, he packed his school bag a little slower and hugged Ethan a little tighter before heading out with the neighbor's carpool. Ethan stood behind the counter longer than necessary, staring at the corner booth by the window. It was empty. Of course it was. For 3 days he poured 2 cups of coffee and only drank 1. He told himself it was fine. Maya needed space. She needed time. People like her, people with worlds on their shoulders, didn't make choices overnight. But somewhere, deep inside, where fear had a quiet voice, Ethan couldn't help but think, this is what always happens, isn't it? People leave. They find something better or bigger or more polished. The truth was, he missed her. Not the glamorous version, not the CEO or the escapee. He missed the woman who licked frosting off her thumb while baking with Ben, who labeled his storage jars out of boredom, who sat beside him after closing and asked, "What was the best part of your day?" like it was the most important question in the world. And now she was gone. That evening, after locking up early and microwaving, leftover soup neither he nor Ben really wanted, Ethan found himself walking, not far, just down Main Street, past the bookstore, the post office, the bench where she'd first confessed her truth. The streets were lit by the soft glow of porch lamps and early spring blooms, but everything looked dimmer somehow. Dim without her. He found himself outside her rental cabin without quite intending to be. The porch light was off, no car in the driveway. The windows dark. She was really gone. He stood there for a while, unsure what he thought he'd find. An apology on the door, a note on the step. But there was only wind, and a single paper cup rolling slowly across the road. He went home, tucked, Ben in, and sat at the kitchen table long after the clock had lost meaning. The next morning, Ethan didn't pour a second cup, and that afternoon he didn't hang up the closed sign. He simply worked, one customer at a time, smile after smile. But something in his heart moved slower, like gears without oil. It was nearly closing when he heard the bell. He turned automatically, already rehearsing a goodbye for the day line, until he saw her. Maya stood just inside the door, a duffel bag, slung over one shoulder, wind in her hair, her eyes searching for something. She looked tired, but clearer, lighter, like someone who'd been to the edge and come back. "I almost didn't come," she said. Ethan blinked. "You're here. I thought about what you said, about being honest about where I was going." He set the towel down slowly, his hands suddenly unsure what to do. "I went to the city," Maya continued. "Sat in the office I used to call mine. Looked out the window at all the things I once thought I couldn't live without." "And?" he asked, voice low. "I felt nothing," she said. "Not joy, not pride, just distance. Like it belonged to someone else." Ethan's breath caught. "So I left. I didn't give them an answer. I just walked out, got in the car, drove all night, because the only place I could picture waking up tomorrow was here." She stepped forward, gently, placing something on the counter, her badge from Lumora, the one with her name, photo and title, Chief Executive Officer. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "I don't want to lead a life that doesn't lead back to someone. And I want that someone to be you." Ethan stared at her for a long, still second. Then he stepped around the counter, slow and steady, like a man who had learned not to rush good things. He stood in front of her, close now. "You came back," he said. "I never really left," she whispered. He reached out, cupped her face, gently, and kissed her, soft and certain, like a man who understood what it meant to lose and what it meant to finally choose. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I don't have a plan," she said. "You don't need one," he replied. "We'll figure it out over coffee." She smiled, and from the counter Ben's voice piped up, "Does this mean she's staying?" They both laughed, turning toward him. Maya crossed the room, crouched in front of him. "Only if that's okay with you." Ben studied her for a long second. Then he grinned. "As long as you bake cinnamon buns again." She pulled him into a hug, and Ethan watched them, heart full in a way he hadn't known was still possible. The table by the window wasn't empty anymore. A year later, spring returned to Maple Ridge. Brighter, greener, louder. The snow had long melted, the sidewalks were dry, and the air smelled of lilacs and fresh paint. Windows opened again. Bicycles reappeared. So did tourists, eager for maple, syrup, and quiet charm. Bean. They looked a little different now. The wood-paneled walls had been polished and brightened, though Ethan insisted they leave the original counter untouched, scratches and all. Maya had added planters to the windows, a fresh chalkboard menu, and a soft jazz playlist that made even the grumpiest customers linger a few minutes longer. But it wasn't the paint or the music that people noticed most. It was the way the place felt more open, more alive. Like it had become a home, not just for caffeine, but for connection. That morning, Maya stood behind the counter, tying her apron with practiced ease. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore a faded t-shirt that read "Kindness is revolutionary." Her fingers were dusted with flour from the early batch of lemon scones she'd insisted on trying. Ben sat at his usual stool, legs swinging, munching on the test subject. "It's a little too lemony," he declared, "but still edible. Hi." "Praise!" Maya deadpanned. Ethan stepped in from the back, carrying a crate of mugs. He paused for a moment, just watching them. This small, unassuming life he never thought he'd get back. And somehow, it was better than anything he'd dared imagine. "You two judging baked goods again?" he asked. "Quality control," Ben said, mouth full. "You married a perfectionist," Maya added. Ethan grinned. "I know. Lucky me. They hadn't made a big deal out of the wedding. Just a simple ceremony under the old maple tree behind the shop. A few friends, a string of fairy lights. Ben serving as both ring-bearer and best man. Maya walked barefoot, her dress wrinkled from hugging too many people, but her smile that night, Ethan swore, was brighter than any diamond. Later that morning, a reporter from the local paper arrived. Older woman, thick notebook, a camera slung over her shoulder. She was doing a feature on unexpected love stories around town. Someone had recommended Ethan and Maya. "You used to run a tech company?" the reporter asked, pen poised. "I used to run from a lot of things," Maya answered. "Now, I just run a coffee shop, with someone who reminds me what matters," the woman smiled. "Mind if I ask what brought you here?" Maya looked around the shop, at the mismatched chairs, the couple holding hands by the window, Ben now showing a younger kid how to build a sugar packet pyramid. "I was lost," she said simply. "Then someone gave me a cup of coffee without asking anything in return." Ethan reached for her hand beneath the counter. She squeezed back. After the reporter left, Maya stepped out to the sidewalk, wiping her hands on a towel. The sun was high now, casting warm streaks across the pavement. Across the street, a teenage boy offered his umbrella to an older woman whose grocery bags were bursting. Maya watched them for a moment, smiling softly. Ethan joined her, 2 steaming mugs in hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She accepted the mug. "How much can change from one act of kindness?" He nodded. "Still think it was just a cup of coffee?" She turned to him, eyes bright. It was never just a cup of coffee. They sat on the bench outside the shop, something Maya had added to encourage lingering. It worked. People sat, talked, read. Sometimes they just existed, and that had become enough. Maya rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. He took a slow sip from his cup, content in the silence they now shared, like a second language. After a while she said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened the door that day?" "No," Ethan said, wrapping an arm around her, "because I did." A gust of spring wind swept through, rustling the nearby tulips and flipping the edge of a handwritten sign taped to the cafe window. It read, "The first cup is always on. A so is kindness." Inside, someone rang the bell for service. Ethan stood, pressing a kiss to Maya's temple. "I've got this one," he said. Maya leaned back, eyes closed, the sun warm on her face. She had spent years building a world of metrics and margins, success measured in market shares and glowing press. But here, the currency was different, measured in laughter, second chances, and the kind of love that didn't need headlines to be real. She'd found more than a new life. She'd found home, and it had all started with the warmest cup. Now that you've heard the story, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? What part of this story touched your heart the most? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them, and your words truly mean the world. And if stories like this bring you a little light, a little warmth at the end of your day, consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free, and it helps us keep creating more heartfelt stories for people just like you. Thank you for spending your time here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for believing, like we do, that kindness still matters. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and take care of your heart.